some degree by Hammond in these areas right here, which we refer to as Area 1 and Area 4. And then Avi Ofer had dug a long trench to try and determine stratigraphy, which he called Area S for slope. And but in terms of the kind of the central part of the city, only this area right here at one end of one of Hammond's longer trenches actually approaches the upper levels of the city. But it's right there where one or two of Hammond's most significant finds were found, and which have a bearing on how we relate Hebron to the Bible. Here, of course, is the most significant site from my point of view, the site of the ancient city gate, and we'll investigate that for just a minute too. Now, I gave you, I think, a little bit better outline of the stratigraphy of Hebron on the back of your sheet. This PowerPoint presentation, I'm always just importing slides that I've previously used, and as I thought, well, Stephen said, make us a handout, and I thought, well, I'll do the stratigraphy, and I put a little more effort into the stratigraphy chart on your handout than on this slide, but they're basically the same. They show that you have basically three kind of clumps of activity here. The early Bronze City, which existed in the 3rd millennium BCE, a walled city with a 6-meter wall around it, must have been a tremendous site, may actually have been bigger than the Middle Bronze and Iron Age city, but which was destroyed and went out of use, and for centuries the site lay unoccupied. And then the Middle Bronze II city, here of course is where I want to focus, where a new Middle Bronze city wall was built around the town that grew up in the Middle Bronze Age, the town that, according to the Bible, Abraham became one of the earliest inhabitants of. And then the town continues, surrounded by that same city wall, through the Late Bronze Age, without any significant or anything nearing total destruction. The town just continues. The Hyksos did not destroy, that is to say, the Egyptians who chased the Hyksos out of the Delta did not destroy Hebron the way they did some other cities. And after the Late Bronze Age, it does not appear that Hebron was at all destroyed by the Iron Age inhabitants that we generally identify with the earliest Israelites. And through Iron I, and then until the end of Iron II, the city continued, surrounded by that same Middle Bronze Age wall with repairs, and continued with two types of housing, as near as we can tell from the few areas that have been dug. Houses that had been originally built in the Bronze Age and were 800 years old in some cases by 600 BC, and houses then built in the Iron Age that had that typical Israelite four-room design. And when we saw both the Israelite style of houses, which clearly were built in the Iron Age, but also we see that there were earlier different floor plan and stratigraphically determinable Bronze Age houses that had remained with repairs in use throughout Iron II, what we got a picture of in our mind was a biblical phrase, which was said, back to the Israelites in the time of Moses and Joshua, that you would inhabit a land and houses that others had built. And Hebron seems to have been a place where truly Bronze Age houses were inherited by early Iron Age people and continued in use. And a lot, I think, of the traditional ideas of what happens in early Israel may be attributable directly to some of the things that were happening in Hebron. Well, here's Phil Hammond, and this is not the young Phil Hammond, the dashing guy that you see kneeling down in the corner photograph there, examining a cooking area. This is the older Phil Hammond that I knew, who said to me in 1986, "You have two choices, young man." I'd done most of my doctoral work in archaeology in Israel, but didn't want to write in Hebrew. And if you know anything about getting a PhD in archaeology in Israel, it's a lot tougher than America. The Israelis are very demanding, and I felt like I could probably do just as well in America. So I went over to the University of Utah and got to know Hammond, and he was delighted and happy to accept that on-the-ground experience that I had gained all through 6 or 7 years in the early 1980s. What he said to me is that you can, if you wish, propose a doctoral dissertation subject, and you will have a very hard time getting it approved, because I'm very difficult to deal with, he said. Or you can accept my invitation to publish my material on Hebron that will otherwise never be published, and you can have it approved immediately. I did not realize at the time what an incredible gift I was being given, because doctoral students usually study to find a subject matter which will be interesting and useful to the field, etc. I just was so intimidated, I said, yeah, I'll do it. Since that time, it's been a great, great blessing in my life to have worked on his material, which he gave me carte blanche. I mean, his lab, he was too busy with Petra to care. There was this old, forgotten area of his lab in Utah where all of his Hebron stuff was, and that became the area where I excavated in a musty old building in the University of Utah for several years at the end of the 1980s, excavating and excavation. Here's an old photograph when the excavation in 1964 by Hammond was first taken up, showing how much less building activity had occurred in Hebron by 1964. The hills there in the distance don't have any of the buildings on them, and you can see just among the low, flat houses there, which haven't experienced any shelling or anything like that would come in future years, you can see the tomb of Machpelah, the tomb of the patriarchs there in the distance. Here from Hammond's Area 2 that was begun in 1964. And they dug in 3 areas that first year. And the most significant area, I'll talk about Area 1 in a minute, but Area 3 is really the one that for me turned out to be the most fascinating, because it turns out to have been the ancient gate area. Now, to be honest with you, even after Hammond was finished with this, he did not realize that it was what it is. And that may be because he had a focus that he had wanted to go back, and the dig was truncated by the war in 1967, and he put materials away and focused on Petra. But apparently after the discoveries made in 1966, he focused so much on other things that he didn't spend 4 or 5 years thinking about what Area 3 could have meant. And so I spent 4 or 5 years thinking about what Area 3 could have meant. And when I went back to him and told him what I thought it was, he said, that's what that's got to be, he said. And then he gave me 15 reasons why I was right, which was nice, because usually they tell you you're wrong in those situations. Here's a picture of Hammond standing in Area 3 on top of a terrace in which part of the ancient wall of Hebron is preserved. And you can see those large